Alright, let's get started. This is sourdough croissants. And what I'm doing is I'm going to get the ingredients mixed together, and then what this batch is going to do is make two batches of croissants in a particular size, and you'll see that later on in the video. So, the ingredients. I have 1,000 grams of flour. Now, in my case, I'm using a combination of all-purpose, just an unbleached all-purpose flour, and a locally grown, freshly milled hard wheat, and somewhere on the video here in the display you'll see the quantities that I've come up with, if I figure out how to do that. My sourdough. This is a sourdough. This is actually leftover sourdough from bread baking. When I'm refreshing my sourdough starter, I have leftover, and then rather than throw it out or send it to the chickens or whatever, I collect it sometimes. And in this case, I use two different kinds of starter. I prefer doing this. One is just one with the unbleached all-purpose flour, and the other one I use is, or I make up, I use red 5 whole wheat. I just find the two work better for me. So this is 200 grams of sourdough. Then I have 600 grams of milk that I have heated up in the microwave. I need it kind of warm. 60 grams of sugar. 20 grams of salt. Now, this is a sourdough bread, or sourdough croissant dough, and I have, and you can make croissants quite successfully just using sourdough. But I have found that when I made them up, there was a flavor and a smell that was missing that I like, and that comes from just the commercial yeast. So I have 14 grams of yeast here, and all it really is to give me the flavor that I'm after. So I've got the salt, the yeast, and I have 120 grams of melted butter. And then what you really should do is start with 2 pounds of butter, salted butter. You can use unsalted if you wish, but I prefer just ordinary salted butter. So I take two pounds of butter, and then I make 2 blocks, and I find this works easier. This is 2 blocks of 300 grams each. So I take a solid a pound of butter, and I take off 300 grams, and I like keeping it all in one piece, because this is what's going to go in between the layers of dough when I start rolling it out later on. And I need to press this flat, and it just works better if you have just a single solid block of butter in order to flatten it and roll it out thin in the way that you need it. This is just plastic wrap, so I don't make a mess on my table or my rolling pin. And then I'll reuse this when I wrap up my dough once I divide it up, because once I've got it all prepared, I freeze it for a short while. I find once it's frozen, it gives me a flakier and crisper croissant when I get around to cooking it. Now, in this case, what I do as a first step is I'm going to mix my sourdough starter into the warm milk and the sugar and the yeast. Those go together for now. And I'll let these sit for a little while so that they start working together. And once this gets a little bit of loosened up and start actually working in the milk, it'll be easier to mix in the dry ingredients. Do not put the salt in until kind of the last. Just like with a sourdough bread, you want to delay putting any salt in to the end of the process where you're making the dough, because if you put it in too early, it interferes with the development of the gluten. It makes it too, well, not too, it makes it stiffer and a little bit less elastic if you put the salt in too early. Alright, let's get back to this. This should be a little bit frothy, nice and loose in here. And throw the flour in. And I'll put the salt in. Now I'll put the butter in a little bit later. Let me get this mixed up a little bit. I want to mix it up like this a little bit before I put the butter in, because the butter could just get absorbed into the unmixed flour, and it takes a little bit longer to get it thoroughly mixed in. So let me get some of this mixed up to a certain extent. That's not a big deal, really. And then throw the butter in. We'll get it butter mixed in with the flour and the rest of the ingredients, so it's not too wet in any one spot. And then I'm going to throw it on the table. These are handy. Nice and flexible. They do a good job of cleaning out walls and stuff. So, you see it's all reasonably dry. There's no messy spots with the butter. And I'm just going to knead it for a while to get all the ingredients consolidated in a nice smooth batch. Dough. And then once I have this worked together nicely, I'll put it back in the bowl and I'll stick it in the fridge to cool it off. Because here's one of the tricky parts. You have to balance the temperature of the dough and the butter so that your dough is cool enough that it doesn't melt the butter or soften it too much. And you want the butter soft enough that you can actually roll it out. But if your butter is too warm, it becomes really impossible to roll out the dough and the butter together without making one hell of a mess. And if your dough is too warm, that's not going to help either. But if it's too cold, you won't get the butter rolled out at all. And you won't get the layers that you want. Alright, so this is done for now. Not sticky. Stick it in a bowl, put a lid on it, stick it in the fridge. So the butter is ready to flatten out. So all you do is use the palm of your hand and then roll it out a little bit like this. You don't have to get all fancy about it. And you want it about, oh, I don't know, 1/4 of an inch thick maybe? And it's only going to be like that. It's going to get flattened out inside the layers of the dough anyways, so it'll get squished up quite a bit. So the dough is cool enough, I think, to work this. So that's what it looks like right now, straight from the fridge. And here's my cup, there it is. And you divide it in half. So this winds up being about 1,000 grams per piece. And it should be cool to the touch, but it's in good shape. Don't need that anymore. And that piece actually can go, one piece can go back into the fridge for now. Don't need it warming up as I'm working with it. Again, you don't really need to fuss with this too much as far as getting it precisely in a good shape. What you're after is a bunch of layers. So this is pretty good for now. I'll take one of my batches of flattened butter and stick it in the middle, or stick it at one end, sorry. Now I'm going to fold it in half to begin with and roll it like this. Now pay attention to how the butter and the dough are working together. You should be able to get a sense that the butter is spreading out evenly, which means that it's not too cold and you're not getting it squished out too much around the edges, which means that it might be a bit too warm. And the roller will, I mean, when you're doing it and you stick it in here first, it could be lumpy and uneven, but your rolling pin is going to even it out pretty nicely. Now from here I do thirds. I fold in thirds. So fold into the middle like this. And then in this case with the top, you'll see that because when we started it was round, I've got this gap here. So what I do is I fold it in like this. So I get a layer there, and then I use just a paintbrush. I don't know if this is necessary, but I like doing it this way. So I just brush the excess flour off the surface that I'm going to fold into. Alright, so there. So in this case what I did is I folded the halves into the middle, folded this down to give me a bit of a better edge, and this is going to be more or less the same thickness as the rest, and then I fold it in half like this. Now here's where you start needing to pay attention to, really pay attention to how the butter and the dough are going to work together. As you add more folds, the dough gets thinner, and you can get the dough breaking, and then you're getting butter and it gets messy. Now as I'm rolling like this, the top is rolling fine, but the bottom is actually not rolling quite as much. So you have to fold it over like this. So you see here, the rolling pin hasn't got that. So I come over to the, flip it over like this, and get this layer rolled out more or less even. Again, don't get too caught up in making this all fancy and perfectly symmetrical in any way. Alright, so fold in thirds like this. Fold in half. And roll again. So you're seeing here, I don't know if you'll see that on the camera, but you see here, you can see the butter, but there is still a bit of the dough there to protect it so it doesn't get too messy. So I get it wide enough, and then I want to lengthen it out some more because I'm going to fold this again. That should be good enough. Fold it into the middle like this, and then fold it over. So it's all just one bundle like this, and this is a single batch of croissant dough. And then the plastic that I had the butter in becomes my wrap for this dough. And then this goes in the freezer. Now, as I said earlier, the croissants turn out better after they're frozen. But it won't stay, you can't keep it in the freezer too long. About a month at the most. The freezing will kill off your yeast and you won't get any kind of rise out of the dough, and the croissants will turn out. So, butter, single layer here. Roll it over once. Roll it in so you get butter kind of even with the dough. In a shape that I can work with. So that was one fold. Here's my next fold. Into the middle. Close off this end. Fold in half. It's almost wide enough already to work with, or sorry, lengthwise this way. I just need to get it wider. Don't forget to flip it over. You have to be kind of patient with this stuff. The thicker it is, the more it's going to resist. As you get it thinner, it becomes easier to extend or roll out. But don't force it too much. You're going to tear the dough and your butter bleeds through. And you don't, kind of defeats the purpose of making layers. Alright, that's good enough for now. Again, fold into the middle. Fold in half. Roll it out. This should be good. Fold into the middle, fold in half, and then this gets wrapped up, goes into the freezer. And that's all that's going to happen for now. This time of year, the bakery isn't all that busy, so this is handy to have in stock in the freezer. Keeping in mind that I can't keep it in the freezer too long. But it is close to Christmas, so somebody will be looking for croissants for Christmas. And I'll make a video of how I roll it out and cut it up for croissants.